Croeso and welcome to the Cardiff Referee Society's meeting with Wales Women's National Team manager Gemma Grainger. Gemma was appointed in 2021 and has had a massive impact since her arrival. The team are currently second in their World Cup qualifying group.
I'm very happy to be here, and anything that I could answer, and maybe I'll have some questions as well. But I guess the best place to start is I've been coaching now. Well, I've been coaching since I was 18. So I've been coaching for 21 years. I was still playing when I started coaching. I've been coaching quite a long time. And I think one of the things that I'm very grateful for is the fact that in the first probably 6 to 10 years of my career, I was coaching grassroots as well as elite players. So that's boys, girls, and I'm working with, like, in schools, football and the community type coaching, pretty much like 30 hours a week. And then I started working full time for the English FA in a program called the FA Skills Program. And that was a program for 5 to 11-year-olds. And like I said, I was coaching boys, girls, elite, grassroots, and it was brilliant. It was where I learned, everything really for the skills that you need as a coach. I love coaching a 5-year-old as much as I love coaching a senior international. And I think for me, I'm just very grateful that my whole career has been football. I'm from the northeast of England. I'm a Middlesbrough fan, so I'm a threat to nobody unless anyone in this room is a Leeds fan or a Newcastle fan or a Sunderland fan. Literally a threat to nobody. But I am passionate about where I'm from. One of the things that, for me, from Middlesbrough, a town in the northeast, it very much relies on the steelworks, the kind of working class mentality. And when I'm in South Wales, I very much feel like when I first went to Port Talbot, my dad used to work at Port Talbot when I was younger. So he worked away throughout most of my childhood, but in Port Talbot, which is very strange for me, because when I go past the steelworks there, if you've ever been to Middlesbrough, Transporter Bridge in Middlesbrough, Transporter Bridge in Newport, steelworks, it's very uncanny in terms of the feeling that I feel in South Wales. My mum's dad is from Cardiff, so that connection is there, although it's not, I never met my mum's dad, so he wasn't someone who was in my life, but some strange connections really. And I worked at the English FA for 14 years, and during that time I coached from the under 15s right the way up to the senior women. So I've been to 5 European championships and 3 World Cups. So I've been to an under 17s World Cup, an under 20s World Cup, and a senior World Cup, and then European championships at every level. So seniors. So my tournament experience really is something that was the biggest, I'm hoping it can be the biggest experience that I can bring across, to get us over the line to qualify. So that's the plan really. And really, we've started the campaign well, the World Cup campaign. I guess in terms of my experience of referees, and I don't know if you wanted me to cover this, but for me in the women's game, what I've noticed going to the European Championships and the World Cups, it's really interesting for me because we get a real mix of referees from different countries. And rightly or wrongly, whenever we get appointed a referee, I look at the country that they're from, because I get an idea of the level of football they're refereeing on a weekly basis. So if we get, a referee from Spain, for example, I can get, or Norway in the women's game, there's fairly strong representation, fairly good leagues in Spain, France, as opposed to, if we were to get a referee from somewhere, for example, Greece, I know they're going to be refereeing at a much different level on a weekly basis. So I get an idea of that kind of, of that kind of level, I guess. I don't know if, if there's more if there is any questions on that. Or what was the, I know that was a little bit about my journey. What else would be useful for me to run through?
Where you see Wales in comparison to other, European nations with development of football for the women's game. Mm-hmm. We spoke to Noel Mooney a few months back, and you had a lot to say and a lot of plans and so on, and I think that you coming on board as well with Noel, it seems to be like, we're on this journey together, and what's your vision?
Yeah, the vision for me is that we're a nation who should be qualifying and competing at major tournaments. And that's got to be the mentality. I think when you look at the quality that we've got in the group, so when I came into the team, it was very much about building on the foundations. But when you've got players like Jess Fishlock in the team, Sophie Ingle in the team, Angharad James in the team, these are world-class players. I've worked with and I've played, been looking to coach against all of the best teams in the world in tournaments. And there isn't a difference. So for me, it's about building the belief in the team, because when I came in last year, it's actually 12 months since I've been in post, and I can't believe it. So 12 months ago, 30th of March, I started. And I wanted to make sure that I build on the foundations that Jane had put in place in terms of the defensive, stability. But then I think what we've developed in the last 12 months and what we're going to keep developing is our in-possession style of play. Jess was voted the most valuable player in the American League, the NWSL, last season. Now, for us to have a player who is being voted the best player in in potentially one of the best leagues in the world, and she represents Wales, is huge. Sophie Ingle representing at the level that she does. We have players, and we should be qualifying and competing for major tournaments, and that we shouldn't be shy about that. I think for me, I've got to work with the girls to get them to believe in what they actually can do. I don't know if you've seen the France game in November. But for me, the France game was a real turning point. And I know we didn't win the game, but we're playing against, in my opinion, one of the best teams in the world, top 5 team in the world. And, it's 1-0 for a long period of time. We hit the post, we play with 10 players for 20 minutes. And there's sometimes the margins are so fine. But for me, I'm really working on the girls' belief to say that we can be a nation who just compete with top teams, and there is no reason why we shouldn't be. So as well as that, qualifying and competing, we do have our vision, we do have our why. We want to inspire the next generation, and we do it for her, for them, for us, and that's our team why. We started with with all the plans that Noel's got, and especially with the link with Rob and the men's team. Rob and I work very closely, and I think that's a real strength of us as an association. So I go to all the men's games, Rob comes to our games, and I met with Robin. Rob actually lives in Sheffield. It's strange. Rob and I live about 40 minutes away from each other. And we met in Leeds in January, and he shared with me what he did for the game against Belgium, because we were looking to play Belgium in February. And so it's very much a collaborative, and that Together Stronger motto, for me, it's how we build on that. But it's not just the motto, it's how we bring it to life. So the fact that I'm going into the men's camp next week for a couple of days, it's an open door. It's quite a normal thing for us to be sharing with some of the best expertise in the world. And it's such a big strength, because for me, having worked obviously in England and then having seen every other nation, I tell the girls this all the time, that between the men's and women's team, there's a real strength, and there's something very special about the country that I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But I'm telling you that it's very unique. There are not many players who love representing their country more than these girls do. Jess has said to me more than once that she would give up every single one of her club kind of achievements to qualify for a major tournament with Wales. I've just actually got off a call to Angharad James. She's in Orlando, and just before I came on here, I'm on a Zoom call to her, and we're talking about, I'm like, how's Orlando? The season's about to start, and all she talks about is, so I'm flying home on this date, the France game is on this date, and we're planning ahead. That their dedication to want to represent their country is very unique. And you could say that a lot of countries have that, but not in the way that it's very special, the way that, that Together Stronger, that kind of family mentality is something that's in the blood with them. If you cut them open, there's no doubt what they bleed. So it's a privilege for me. It makes my job very easy.
And so what's your football philosophy then? Is it trying to get play like Middlesbrough, or would it be look at the Wales national team and try to follow that similar style?
Yeah, we follow, we work from a model, the Welsh way model. So Dave Adams, who's the technical director, and the Welsh way is the way that our youth teams, male and female, want to play. And it very much looks like my philosophy is get the best out of the players that you have on the pitch. So if every player is delivering their strengths, that's when we're going to be at our best. So of course, people are going to focus on what they need to get better on. But my philosophy is, if you deliver what you're absolutely world class at, and every single player does that, we won't be far off. And for me, it's about that flexibility within a structure. So when you see the team play, we're gonna play against France in a couple of weeks. We're going to play against Kazakhstan. we've got to play within a structure, but it's very much about giving those players the freedom within the structure, because there are some things that you can't coach with players. You know, the counter pressing ability of Jess Fishlock, Sophie Ingles' passing range, you know, Anghara James's ability to play box to box. You know, there's so many individual strengths, and we have to make sure our players are playing in their best position and that we get the best out of them. So my playing philosophy is very much about that, is you look at the team that you've got and then you play in a way that complements, you know, that way. So we will be aggressive in the counter press. When we lose the ball, we will try and win it back, because we've got players in our team who are very good at it. When we have the ball, we will look to work through the phases. You know, we've got players with speed, with strength, and we know that in different areas of the pitch, we have different patterns of play, because essentially we make sure that we can execute them, and that's what we work on.
And with regard to the Welsh Women's Premier League, then, do you get to see, you know, some of the players there, or I'll say, like, will that be your future batch of players, and, you know, to come along? Because at the moment, a lot of the top players are playing over in England. Mm-hmm. So how far behind is the Cymru Premier League, the Welsh Women's Premier League? Yeah,
the Adran leagues are a brilliant place for our players to, I think, gain access to a weekly level of football. So you said all our players are, majority are WSL and Championship in England, and then Haz and Jess are over in America. The Adran League is a great league, and you know, the players that are playing within those leagues are youth players. A lot of them are in those leagues. I think the reality is that as the game goes on, the Adran League is going to continue to grow in professionalism, going to continue to grow in standards. But every player now, to play at the highest level, is probably going to need to make that move to be a professional player. So Laura O'Sullivan, who is currently the only player in our team who isn't professional, she's playing at Cardiff. She's got a full-time job. We supplement her training on a weekly basis at our performance squad. So we're trying to make her program more full-time. And yeah, if I'm really honest, if we want to qualify and compete at tournaments, we have to get our players into the best programs for them. So the Adran League is brilliant for a group of players, but we've got to make sure that we can get our players into the right team and give them, you know, the right opportunities that are available. And that means potentially playing outside of Wales, or it could be playing in Wales like Carol does. Laura O'Sullivan's nickname is Carol. I've just gave that away. Not that, I don't know if that's a secret, but like we call her Carol. So if I say that Carol, it's Laura O'Sullivan. You know, like Carol does, and she's obviously working full time because that model works for her. But I do think the women's game will become, you know, more professional.
Yeah, and with regard to like the playing styles and the ethos, then is that also you know, within the coaching setup in the Adrian League as well?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there's a lot of investment, and you know, there's a lot of great coaches in the Adran League, and I think it should be something that we always want to continue to do. You know, whether it's in the Adran League, whether it's in our regional girls academy, we should always want to increase the quality. So if we can support, you know, the coaching, the officiating, basically the resources that go in and around the women's game, that's also going to be, you know, absolutely key. And that's not just in Wales, that's in the women's game. I think the women's game is on a journey to professionalism, and that journey is really important to recognize. The women's game is not the men's game. The women's game is so many years behind the men's game, but it is on that journey to professionalism. So, you know, like you just said there, increasing the quality of coaches, the investment, the resources, it's going to come in time. But, you know, it's like I said, it's on that journey.
Yeah. And I was looking at some of the questions in the chat, and I know you mentioned about the doing the research on referees. Do they play much of a factor? Like, do you do much in way of research apart from the country, or like, say for instance, the playing style? So if you're playing like a stronger team, physically stronger team, and the tackle's a bit rougher and so on, do you give different advice to players?
We do research the referees. We'll look at where they do officiate, what country they're from. We'll look at if they, you know, we'll look at the last few games that they've officiated, especially if it's been, you know, international games, to see if how many yellow cards they've given out, if any red cards. Just look for trends, really. And it's a way to best prepare us. It's funny, when I went to a European Championships, we had a referee workshop, and the referees at UEFA in the workshop basically went through, and I see the question there around the laws of the game. They went through some of the decisions that they would make and why they would make them. So they give examples of challenges. So they had the coaching staff in and the players in, and it was mandatory that we had to sit in. So if you were in the tournament, you had to book an hour in before your first game, and it was in a lecture theatre. And it was like, right, okay, so they put a clip up of a free kick, and then they get you to vote. Is this a yellow card? Is this a red card? Or is this just a foul? And then, so they were trying to educate us around, look, if you make this type of tackle, this is the sanction I'm going to give. I found that really good. I think it's great to educate us, and link to that question there. Every tournament that I've been to, UEFA and FIFA, sitting in those workshops, I'll be honest, you never want to go to them. You're like, oh, go to the referee's workshop. Once you're in there, you're like, this is really good. It's great for the players. The officials were talking about how they watch players. So in one particular team that I coached, we had a player who dived, and the ref was like, you do your analysis on the opposition, we do our analysis on you. So they told us that they watched our players. They were aware of the players who are more likely to dive, or go down under a little bit less pressure. So I think it was great from a respect point of view as well, but also from an education point of view. I think the thing that I find most frustrating about officials, and is I really like to communicate, and I think some officials, and especially in international competition, there's a language barrier. But the thing that we suffer from is, because we speak English, the officials know exactly what we're saying, whereas some of the other nations are obviously speaking and not understanding, whereas everything that we say is heard. But also as well, so the language barrier can be useful, but then it can be unhelpful. But I really like to communicate, and some officiate, I don't know what training is, I don't know how the training differentiates for each country, but there are some officials who won't speak to me, and that's really frustrating. When you want to ask a question, or not even if they were to say to me, no, not now, Gemma, I'll speak to you after the game, or whatever it is. I really enjoy communication. So some of the best officials that I work with, even if I'm maybe I have a different perception on what decisions they make, I would love to have that respectful relationship where communication is important.
And I think that's it. It also comes into it is the cultural thing as well, that in their home country setup and so on, referees are seen quite differently, and like they might be a bit more dictatorial, and so on, and rather than trying to have that common relationship with the players and yourself and so on. I'd say, any thoughts on the prize money for the FA Cup that's in the news at the moment? I haven't seen that news, so I'm not sure who posted that.
Yeah, I think it's the increase in prize money in the Women's FA Cup. Yeah, it's great to see. I think that one of the greatest things about the WSL and the obviously our players who play in England is that it's on Sky Sports now, and it's been branded as this this product, and it looks similar to obviously how they brand the men's game. But the reality is, if you scratch under the surface in the women's game, the resources, the support for our players is still pretty limited. Some of the contracts in the WSL, you can have players on £15,000, £20,000 a year, which financially is quite low. So I'm not suggesting that the prize money should be equal at all, but I think the increase has been nice to see. But I just think for the women's game to keep growing at a steady rate, it's never going to be the men's game. I think some of the top clubs now, Chelsea particularly, I think they're the biggest spenders in the WSL. And it is great to see that, Chelsea's actually a bit of a sensitive subject at the minute, isn't it? They can't be, I shouldn't really have said to Chelsea, they can't do anything at this moment in time. So that's quite sensitive. However, by the way, going back to the Middlesbrough fan thing, I am going to the Middlesbrough-Chelsea game on Saturday with the FA Cup fixture, where Chelsea have sent all their tickets back. So at the Riverside, there's sold out with full Middlesbrough fans, which is going to be a very unique. I've never been to a game where there's only one set of fans before, but that's going to be a new thing. But yeah, I'm really pleased to see the increase. I think it's not about equality. It's about how we get to a point where it's right for the women's game. So we're never going to be at that point where we're, level. And I don't think we should be. I think we should respect our game for what it is and really support its growth.
Yeah. Do you see a major difference in the manner in which referees on the continent apply laws as compared to the ones in Barclays Women's Super League?
Yes, I do. Yeah. I I was actually involved in a game, and I don't know if any of you remember this game. It was in 2015, and I was with England under 19s, and we were in Northern Ireland in Belfast, and we played Norway. No one knew about this tournament until this moment, and it was in the 89th minute, and we got a penalty, and we took the penalty, and one of their players encroached the box, and one of our players did, so both sets of players, and she blew the whistle and gave a free kick to Norway. So it was meant to be a retake, the penalty. She gave a free kick and the game ended. We had to put in an appeal to UEFA, and the reason why it was so unique was because the appeal was, she actually made the wrong decision. The appeal was overturned, and we had to go back and play from the penalty. We had to warm up for the game. Sky Sports were there, everything. We had to play from the penalty, and we had to play the remaining 40 seconds of the game. And if we scored the penalty, we qualified for the Euros, and if we missed it, we didn't. It was crazy. So when we talk about, you know, the referees on the continent, that's probably my most extreme example of a referee just making up a rule, which was absolutely crazy. And then we, like I said, we replayed the game. But I do see a major difference in the manner of referees. I see a major difference in the quality as well. You know, in terms of, like I said, their exposure to their weekly football, and what they're exposed to. It does worry me a little bit, the impact that they can have on games when they're refereeing a game that is of a certain level, and then their weekly level, you know, isn't matched to that. I think the standard in the WSL has gone up as the years have progressed, and I think that in terms of the question about is it stricter, I think it's fairer in the WSL. I think the WSL is very consistent. When I look at the decisions, you know, what's really hard in the WSL at the moment, and I feel for the referees. Like I said to you, both the men's game and the women's game are on Sky, but the technology in the women's game to support the referees is so far away from what the men's is. And I know VAR causes controversy in the men's game, but even we're talking like goal line technology in the WSL, there is no goal line technology. So at the weekend, Reading were playing Manchester United at the Medeski. There's no goal line technology being used, and Reading, it's live on Sky, and Manchester United score a goal. It goes over the line by a mile, but the official on the assistant referee is not able to be up with play. Anyway, the play continues and they score, but they're just the small moments where the women's game is going to be under more of a microscope, but they don't have VAR and they don't have goal line technology. So it's hard because it's the same product that's being branded, but it's difficult for the officials because they don't have the same support.
To what extent do you think that a difference in refereeing on a continent may have caught out Kaylee Green, who's picked up 2 red cards during a current campaign?
I wondered if you were going to ask me about Kaylee Green. I thought that was going to come up. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think it's a fine line though, because, you know, I've spoken to Kaylee about both instances, and when we played Slovenia away, you know, when you watch it back, it's there's no contact, but you could argue there's intent, you know, with the way that she goes into the challenge and the angle of her foot. So you can argue either way. I think my conversations with Kaylee are similar to Kiefer Moore, you know, how Kiefer is with the way that he plays, because there's been quite a lot of talk around him, around how he jumps and how, you know, continental referees are maybe punishing him for that. You know, and he's had a few yellow cards with regards to that. But for me with Kaylee, it's about, you know, her biggest strength is her determination and her ability to press and close play down. And it comes from a pure place of energy. And it's about me educating her around how that can be perceived, because, you know, not every player is like that. So yeah, I do think that it did contribute to it. However, I think there's an element of me educating her around, you know, because she's in full, you know, in terms of what she's in control of, she's got to make decisions where, you know, if we're not sure about what the referee is going to, how the referee is going to perceive something, then we have to err on the side of, you know, don't make those challenges. You know, we have to be sensible with that. But yeah, I do think that that impacted slightly.
And we always hear this saying, like the game's gone soft. Do you ever think that sometimes with regard to some challenges and the way how certain tackles or issues are interpreted? Yeah,
I think for me, the one thing that any coach wants is consistency. So if you're going to let the game flow, let the game flow. If you're going to, you know, if your philosophy is around, you know, making sure that, I don't know, whatever I think consistency would be the thing that I would say that every coach wants. I think it's the inconsistency that sometimes can be, you know, the most frustrating thing. It's such a big thing when we were in France. And I don't know how you would feel about this, or whether you felt it yourselves when you've been at a game, or if you've been refereeing, etc. But I felt that in the France stadium, there was about 28,000 French fans. Some of the red wall came over. It was a small group, but I could see the referee becoming more and more influenced by the fans, by the French players. And that's a really powerless thing for me to be there, you know, and see a referee who is starting to be influenced, you know, because the French are top 5 in the world. They've got some of the best players in the world. You know, the way she was speaking to them, you know, when you kind of look and thinking, God, you know, is this fair? Is that something we just have to deal with? Is that the same when, you know, people come to Wales because of, you know, it's the home team? So there was a little bit of, a bit of frustration there for sure.
One of the strengths of the Welsh team has been that passion, that commitment, and you know, putting a good challenge in and making the opposition know you're there and so on. But I see, like, you know, continental teams, they play slightly differently. So would you like, say, go into a game and say, well, you know, this kind of team, they play this particular way, so therefore, you know, your challenging's got to be slightly different, or less of a press, less of a tackle?
Yes, definitely. I think we have to, you know, with regards to the players, should we as the coach, you know, talk to them about how we play? Absolutely, we have to, but we have to keep our identity. You know, we have to be aware of it, and we have to be sensible, because it will affect the play. You know, Kaylee being, you know, getting red carded affects then the game. So we do have to be aware of it, but we can't lose our identity. You know, that shouldn't be something that we do, because, you know, some of the nations I've played against, I wouldn't want their identity. A nation particularly who we played against this year, we seen one particular player, and basically we said to our girls, if you contact her, she's going to fall to the ground. So we did, when we were putting pressure on the player, we knew not to touch her, and because she would fall to the ground. But I'd like to think that the referees see that as well, but it was a deliberate tactic as well. It was any touch and she would fall, and you know the noises that players can make. Because
with regard to the laws of the game quiz, then, if you would do quizzes on the laws, how good would you, like, you know, could you referee a game quite effectively?
Well, as 11v11 or a 7v7 or a 9v9, I think I think one of the things that I'd like to say, so I don't know if I feel like you're going to test me now though, so I don't want to be tested. But in terms of you know, season by season, the law changes and, you know, the different rules that come in, it is obviously very important that I am you know, very much you know, kind of up to date with any rules. I tell you, one of the rules that this might be a little bit out there, but this was a conversation I had with someone yesterday. One of my observations at the moment around penalty shootouts, and we had a penalty shootout in Pinatar, and you know the different rules between the fine line between the goalkeeper staying on the goal line.
Yeah.
Because in Pinatar, the goalkeeper was off the goal line, and I was disappointed when I watched the footage back that I didn't see that, because the official is there, and I'm thinking, how have they missed that? But anyway, it goes back to the point of I was watching the Carabao Cup final and the penalty shootout, and I don't know if there's going to need to be a change in the law in penalty shootouts, because there are more and more penalty shootouts now that are going like to 7-7, 8-8, 9-9, 10-10, 11-11. That not a lot of teams are missing, you know, penalties in penalty shootouts. And I don't know, this might be very out there. It was just a conversation I had with the coach, because I think the other day there was the world record for the most penalties, you know, in a penalty shootout. It went really high. And at the highest level of the game, when I watched the Liverpool-Chelsea, you know, Carabao Cup, top professionals are going to start to be able to psychologically deal with, because it's never technically, is it? It's always the psychological element when it comes to penalty shootout. And I was thinking, I wonder if the rule is going to change at some point, you know, if that did happen, where more and more penalty shootouts, you know, we're going to such high numbers that I'm not suggesting we do penalties like do you remember how they used to do it in the MLS back in like the 90s when they'd start from the halfway line and they'd run?
Right, yeah.
I'm not suggesting that. I'm not suggesting that at all. But it was just an interesting conversation I had yesterday.
Yeah, it's always interesting, like the way that they go and respond to certain issues, because, like, you know, the goalkeepers union might turn around and say, well, we're disadvantaged. There's the evidence. But then the TV companies might turn around and say, well, you know, it's good entertainment. Or the referees might turn around and say, well, it's difficult to manage the you know, being on the line and so on, and that judgment. So yeah, we have to wait and see what IFAB come along with. I've got a hand raised from Michelle.
I just want to say, you know, well done, you know, for what you've achieved so far. Being at the Estonia and Wales game in the City Stadium, I think what I loved about that game was half time, I went to the toilet and I nearly missed the start of the second half because I was queuing so long, because there was so many girls there watching the game. It was incredible to get that audience into the City Stadium. So just well done for what you're doing for the women's game, and hopefully, you know, you'll do really well with them.
No, thank you, Michelle. I really appreciate that, and I think you know, for me, I think a lot of my education has come from the UEFA and FIFA tournaments. Maybe I was a little bit naive, maybe in my younger years, around the preparation for officials, and by being educated in those workshops and understanding the process, because ultimately we both want to be successful. So yeah, I appreciate that. I might need some of you to be with me when I'm trying to speak to some of the referees that we get, like, who are maybe not as friendly, and they're probably thinking, what is she doing? But genuinely just trying to work together to make it successful. And you know, the hope is the Estonia game at Cardiff City, that we broke the record attendance, and the hope is that we'll do that for the France game. So if anyone on this call would want to come on to the France game, please let me know, and I can arrange for those tickets to be sorted, because one of the biggest things for us is the strength and how much the crowd inspires us. You know, since I've been here, there's a special moment when the anthem is sang at home, and I've never felt that before, you know, in terms of being and representing. So it's a very special moment. So yeah, if anyone does want to come to the France game, we want to break the record at Parker Scarlets. So yeah, please let us know and we can sort that out.
A quick one, just going back there about with the communication with referees and assistants. Now, this is from many years' experience, and I'm sure I can speak for many officials here. There are some managers, and as well as players, who are unmanageable. When they cross that white line, they turn into someone completely different to what they are on the outside of the field of play. And that is just the way it is. And it's impossible to manage. Now, likewise, there are some referees that you can't communicate with, and I appreciate that. But it's that fine line of having that sort of common joy where people can communicate. I don't know what that line is and how it's met, but there will always be, I would say, like a them and us. But some players and some managers are just, you can't talk to him, don't talk to him, and they're just raving lunatics. I'm hoping there's some nodding heads from the rest of the referees in the group. And the second point I wanted to raise was, are you able to share what you're going to be sort of talking about with Rob when you meet up next week?
Yeah, definitely. You know, I mean, the first part that you just said there, I completely agree, because you know, I've definitely worked with coaches where when the game starts, they're, you know, the different people, and you're almost looking as if to say, wow. But I think for me, what's always been useful, I know this might sound very very general and very simple, but before a game, I think sometimes building that kind of conversation around, you know, once a referee said to me, you know, Gemma, what's the expectations today? And for me, it's like, you know, it'd be great to know how you'd like to communicate, and almost contract before the game. You know, if they would say to me, Gemma, I'm not going to speak to you during the game today, that is my preference, it almost gives me okay, I understand that now. Or, you know, Gemma, you can speak to me after the game, or Gemma, feel free to speak to the fourth official at any time. And, you know, whatever that is, I think it's almost good to, because like I said, for me, consistency is the most important thing. You know, and whether decisions are right or wrong, I can't control that. But I guess it's it's my probably more down to my philosophy and my integrity. But I completely agree with you. You know, you don't know, do you? It's a very fine line for some people, but for me, I tend to stay fairly calm. The only time
we'll hold you to that.
Yeah, you can. The only time I guess I'm not calm is when I think, you know, it's becoming unsafe. Because we play against some teams, unfortunately, that just want to absolutely, you know, their way of getting advantage is to injure us. That's probably the only time I get frustrated, really, but that's more a protection of the players than anything.
What about the meeting with Rob?
Oh, yes, sorry, I forgot about that. So my hope with Rob is to, so obviously they're playing in a playoff, and the World Cup qualification is the same for the men as it is for the women. So I'm hoping to feel what it's like to play in that one-off game, because it's a very unique circumstance. So for me, I won't be getting in and around Rob and the team. I'll probably be more like a fly on the wall, because I know what it's like for him. He doesn't want any additional, you know, kind of noise. And Rob is so open. He's like I said, he's welcomed me into everything. So I'll spend some time watching training when they're training at the Vale. I'll go into a couple of meetings, and then I really just want to feel what the prep is like, and then go to the Austria game. And it's quite nice to be not in the spotlight, because it takes a bit of pressure off me in terms of I can sit back and actually observe, what it feels like. And then depending on what happens in the game, hopefully after a successful result, I'll be able to be involved, in the debrief as well, to see how they're going to debrief it. Because obviously the window's changed a little bit, hasn't it, where the second game is not taking place in this window. So yeah, that's my hope, just to observe. I want to feel what it feels like, with the hope that we'll be in that situation, and it'll give us an advantage in October, if we can be successful.
Thanks, Gemma. This is really interesting. This is really good to listen to what you're saying. Two-part question. If I can ask the first one and then hand over and then ask the second one. The first one is a playing question, and the second question is a refereeing one. So in the immediate term, I think that the Gennaro Adran has been a game changer for women's football in Wales. But from a playing perspective, I watch Barry Ladies quite often. We already have under-17 and under-19 internationals playing. For example, we have the outstanding Manon Pius, who's a friend of my daughter's, and Megan Bowen, both of whom have stepped up, not been intimidated by physicality from experienced players, and so on and so forth. So I wanted to ask you, young talented players that are playing in Gennaro, what, from your parochial international manager perspective, what would you like to see happen to those? As in, would you like to ultimately find their way into the Barclays League? And generally, are scouts watching these games already, as far as you're aware?
Yeah, definitely. So both parts of that question I've watched. So, for me, I've been to see our under-17s play against Scotland. So the players that you're speaking about, I've seen them at that level. And that's one of the huge benefits for me, to watch our girls at under-17s. I've watched our under-19s. I'm aware of every single player in the pathway. I'm working with a gentleman who does that role on the men's team. I don't know if you know who Gus is. A lot of people know Gus. So I don't know if anyone knows Gus on this call, but Gus Williams is someone who I'm working with very closely around what our talent identification looks like. So all players in the Adran League are being scouted. In answer to your question, yes, we have a scouting network that covers the north of England, the south of England, and Wales. So our scouting network is open, it's expanding. And I think that one of the things that I've tried to do with the Adran League is make sure that we are going to scout players, getting reports on those players, getting regular reports on those players. In terms of, some of our international youth players, I think that you could look at examples like Carrie Jones and Maria Francis Jones around there. They've moved, Carrie obviously has moved to Manchester United. Maria is now at Manchester City studying at university in Manchester. I think there's always got to be a route for that professionalism. And I think that, ultimately for every single one of our players, they've got to have the best individual program, because when they're competing against other international players, when we play, our under-19s are playing in a tournament in a couple of weeks' time in England versus England, Belgium and Iceland. And ultimately we want them to be able to compete, because we don't just want to qualify once. So physically they've got to be right, technically, tactically. And the Adran League is brilliant. It's a brilliant place for our young players. But I think as they progress to to the next level, I think it's important that we recognise the benefits of the Adran League, but we also recognise, we have one of the best leagues in the world on our doorstep. So for our players to be able to access that is a positive thing, but only if it's right for them. Only if it's right for them. It doesn't mean that players have to leave to do that. If a player is in Wales and wants to stay and play, we've got to find a bespoke program to get that to work for them. And I think that's, with the smaller nation, that's what we've got to do. We've got to use our strengths, we've got to utilize them and really get that bespoke program in place.
Oh, thank you. The refereeing question then. Again, related to this game changer that is Gennaro, it has access to the best officials in Welsh football, referees and assistants. There are 4 games this coming Sunday, and of the 12 officials, 10 are gents and 2 are ladies. Now, the journey in the English women's game may have had a similar story. Rewinding, can you recall what was done to create that critical mass of female officials within the women's game in England. So those statistics, if you like, flipped over.
Yeah, I think it was, I think there was a lot of initiatives within the English FA, you know, around that referee development coordinators, the county FAs in England. I know that role exists. I actually, where I live in Leeds, I live next to West Riding County FA. And a close friend of mine, Hannah Simpson, is the chief executive of the county FA. And in terms of what she leads and her representation, for me, it's, you know, you can't, it's the same in coaching as well. You know, although there are growing opportunities for female coaches, I think it does come down to that development opportunity. But, you know, there are some really strong male allies that I have from a coaching point of view. And I think it has been built in England, and particularly in the WSL, through those male allies supporting, you know, and giving opportunities to females through female-only refereeing courses, through female-only development, you know, opportunities. And I'm a big believer in, you know, as a female coach, that you've got to invest the time, and I'm very aware of the time that needs to be invested. You know, as a referee, it's not something that you turn up and do and then you become good at. It's years and years and years and years of dedication, and you know, it's a journey. When I very first started coaching, I worked at North Riding County FA, and I worked as a women and girls development officer, and we had a refereeing development officer then, a guy called Ross Joyce, and I think he's still refereeing now, but he that was in 2003, 2004. So, you know, that's nearly 20 years ago now. So in terms of that journey, those development officers were in place at that point. So I think it takes place over time. But I think it is quite unique, and to grow numbers with females, you know, you can't be what you can't see. So the more role models we have, the better it's going to be for, you know, for the game, and that more encouragement. And the male allies are so important. You know, some of the best friends that I have in the game are male coaches who are working in the Premier League, who are working at, you know, the highest level of international football. And like I said, Rob is one of them for me. And I think that that can be a big strength for us, you know, certainly in Wales. And
we see Rebecca Welsh making a massive impact in the EFL. Do you see many pathways for women coaches as well on that side of things?
Yeah, I do think it's increasing, you know, the the number of female coaches. It's not comparable to the men's game. I got asked last week, do I think that a female coach could ever, you know, coach in the Premier League? You know, so for example, could someone like a Jurgen Klopp have a female assistant? I think at the right time that'll happen. I think that I think one of the strongest things that I would say is that diversity is so important. So you know, in this particular case with male and females, that there's such a strong diversity in what you know, females can bring and what males can bring. So from that element of diversity, I think it's a real strength that potentially the men's game, from a coaching point of view, currently misses out on. So I think it'll be a big day when it happens. But I do believe that, you know, if a female coach or female referee is going to be representative, they've got to be good enough as well. You know, it's not about giving opportunities that are, you know, just opportunities for, you know, for the sake of that equality. So for me, I'm very passionate about, I'm hoping that the first female coach that steps in the game, and you mentioned about Rebecca Welsh, and the other female referees, you know, we want them to continue to get better, because, you know, for me, I have no preference over whether it's a male or female referee, as long as it's a referee who, you know, is at the level, you know, for the level of the game almost.
With the Belgium game, because, like, you know, really, you know, like, disappointed with the result, no doubt. But what lessons did you learn from that game?
Yeah, I mean, so Belgium are obviously competing in the European Championships this summer. So these are the type of teams we want to play. You know, they were the highest ranked team in the tournament. To lose to them in the penalty shootout, believe it or not, was perfect, because I said to the girls, I'd rather lose this penalty shootout than a penalty shootout in a major tournament, because that's what we're aiming to do. So for us, it was to go toe to toe with them. We should have beat Belgium in normal time. We had chances to beat them. But, you know, when I was talking about that belief and getting the girls to believe in what we're capable of, we are not the team that we were 12 months ago. So it's almost cementing that with the girls and saying, this is us now, and them recognizing it. And against Belgium, I think the Belgium game, what I do remember, it was the weekend of the storm, and the wind was, I think you had it in the UK on the Friday, then on the Saturday it arrived with us. And so it was a very tough game, but we tend to do well when it is tough. But Belgium got a surprise. Belgium for me, they've been coached by the same coach for a long time, and some of their patterns of play, some of their technical execution is one of the best, and you'll see that in the Euros this summer. And after about 20 minutes, you could see them looking as if to say, who are we playing here? They respected us, so they dropped off. And when they were defending, they initially started pressing us. Then all of a sudden they were kind of like, oh, and they dropped off. And that was a huge sign for me. I was like, people are recognizing, the strengths that we have. It was a shame we couldn't win it in normal time because, we would have been in the final. Belgium ended up winning it. So you're a penalty shootout away from being in the final. But I said the same, in the Ireland game, the result didn't go our way, but you want to learn these lessons, in terms of the right time to win and the right time to learn. I was so happy with the tournament because every single team we played were higher ranked than us, and not one of them was, I didn't look at one of them and think, oh, we're way off here. I was like, Belgium, European Championships, Scotland, European Championships, World Cup. We're this team now, and we need to tip over the edge and really start to show people who we are on a consistent basis. And that's what we plan to do against France. Who knows what's going to happen in the France game, but what I can tell you is that we'll deliver a game plan and we won't leave anything on the pitch. We will deliver what we say we're going to deliver, and we'll see where, that gets us. Yeah,
brilliant. And with regard to players like Jess Fishlock and Sophie Ingle, they're like national treasures. Are there players in a background who can fill in their boots?
Yeah, the good news is yes, and that's the short answer is yes. We have so many talented young players, and it's exciting. This week I've spent time. I always speak to them off camp when we have player calls, so I check in with them. So today I've been speaking to Carrie Jones. She's up at Manchester United. Carrie's 18 years old. She's done a professional contract at Manchester United. She is, she is going to be a Welsh player for the next, she's 18, 20 years till she's 38. By the time Carrie's 100 caps, she's the next, in fact, I won't say what she's the next of because it puts too much pressure on her, but she's the next, well-capped, Welsh international for us. And I think that we've got so many examples. It's not just Carrie. It's, I can name Esther Morgan at Tottenham. In that France game in November, we played Esther Morgan at left back and Carrie Jones at left forward. They're both 18 years old. We're playing in France and they're playing against two of the best players in the world, the right back for France and the right forward. Yeah. I would have on my top list of best players in the world. So proud. Opportunities like that, when they step on the pitch in future, we've got so many players who are coming through and playing in the Championship currently. So a lot of our best young players are playing in the Championship just underneath the WSL in England. And yeah, they're going from strength to strength. And yeah, I'm excited for the future as well as, we're going to keep Sophie and Jess for as long as we can. I don't know. They're not going anywhere.
Brilliant. Thank you, Gemma. So yeah, thank you once again for giving up your time and giving us an insight into the future prospects, and really exciting and
brilliant.
Yeah,
Diolch everyone.
Diolch yn fawr, and thank you for watching the video. Please subscribe to the channel and like the video. Hwyl fawr.